My father was a Jew born in Poland, 1926. Back in 1926, as I think you all know, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have television, they didn't have a lot of things. So what he did as his fun was he became a musician. He learned how to play the violin very young, and he became a violinist. Well, when Hitler decided to take over, he went and got all the Jews in Poland and a lot of other people and put them in concentration camps. And my father was taken to the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland with his parents and with his sister to become prisoners. Well, my father's job in the concentration camp was to entertain the troops with his violin music. That's what he would do. His job was actually, as a young teen, to lead the death marches that brought the prisoners who were condemned to die to the crematorium. Now, some concentration camps, as I know you all know, had ovens. They just burn you to death. Others had gas chambers where they'd gas you to death. Some had firing squads. They'd shoot you. At Auschwitz, they had crematoriums, and his job was he'd lead the march, playing the violin, entertaining the troops, and the people would then go to their demise. He actually led the death march that brought his parents and his sister to their demise. And he survived because he could play the violin. Well, when the Russians advanced on Poland, they took the prisoners on a 16-day march east to Germany. They walked for 16 days to Germany, and my father was then interred at the Buchenwald concentration camp, and he survived there for the very same reason, playing the violin to entertain the troops. Well, when Patton liberated the prisoners and the war was over, my father, like many Polish Jews, came to America to start a better life. His name at the time was Henry Hochberg. Well, Henry Hochberg had just survived an atrocity, and he did not want to have another Holocaust in his life, so he wanted to hide the fact that he was Jewish. So what he did was he changed his name. He changed Henry to Henri. He changed Hochberg to Aubert. He said, well, why did he pick Aubert? Aubert was a French manufacturer of violins. So he just decided he'd be Henri Aubert, and he adopted this kind of French persona to hide the fact that he was a Polish Jew. Well, he gets to New York, and he meets this woman, and he marries her, and about a year and a half later, I pop out. And the woman he met was my mother. She was a cradle Catholic, and he was so concerned at that time in 1957 that nobody would know that his son had Jewish roots. He was concerned about this. He didn't want me to be the victim of a Holocaust. So he actually argued that my name should be Christian Joseph Aubert. That wasn't probably the most Jewish name he could think of, but that's what he came up with. My mother settled on Christopher Joseph Aubert. Well, when I was 2, my parents divorced. When I was 14, my father died of brain cancer. In the meantime, my mother meets another man when I was about 6 and marries him. He too was Jewish. At that time, his Jewish faith was a lot more important to him than my mother's Catholic faith was to her. So my mother converted to Jewish, and I was then raised Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed at 13, and in the Jewish faith, bar mitzvah is in certain ways similar to the Catholic confirmation. You're 13, you begin your life as a man, and now you're going to live as a Jewish man. It's the beginning of your adult life. Well, where I came from, both in my town and in my family, we were kind of like the Jewish version of what we've all heard of the C&E Christians, the ones that come to church on Christmas and Easter. We were the High Holy Day Jews. We never went. I'm not bragging. It's just, it kind of is what it is. So I go through my argument. I said, you know what, guys, I love you. I quit. I argued myself into the Catholic Church because I realized whatever question I was asked, we had an answer. If I didn't know the answer, I developed the confidence to know that there was an answer. So now I've become this evangelist for the Catholic faith. And Hector was talking, Hector's a friend of mine too. We have different ways of going about things. I never start the fight. I evangelize by my life. I just want people to say, golly, Chris and Rhonda, what a great marriage. Look at those kids, they're so great. I want what they have. And if they bring it up, now you've opened up a hornet's nest. I'm not going to let go to either Catholic or you tell me to leave. So that's what I do now. And I told you this story about the Holocaust for a reason. My dad was so concerned about me being a victim of another Holocaust that he wanted me to have a name to hide my Jewish roots. The irony of it was, I was a victim of the Holocaust, the American Holocaust. And it's that journey that opened my eyes to real life. Had I not done that, I'm not sure I'd be here right now. When you realize there's so much more out there besides me, you can't help but find a greater good. Well, in the process of being an evangelist, after arguing myself into the Catholic faith, I developed all these great arguments. I'm a linear thinker. Okay? I go A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. It's just how I am. And I had all these great reasons to talk about faith. Well, this is why the Eucharist is this. And they're pretty persuasive. And if you open your eyes to our faith at the water cooler or when you're cutting your grass and your neighbor attacks you and asks you if you've been saved, to go to the church or what's happening now, I know you've all had this. You have to have the confidence to know there's one church in the world that even applies for the job of being the church that Christ started. Only one applies for the job. No one else even claims it. And in every denomination that's out there, you can trace it back to the beginning. Ralph hung a shingle up at this church, and that's when it started. You can trace it all back. Ask somebody, when did our church start? Who started it? The answer is Christ started it. And there's so much empirical evidence out there. If you take away your faith blinders and just go by history, the history supports our church. There's no argument that there's a linear line of popes. There's no argument at any of this stuff. So once you develop the confidence to understand that and understand that we do have the fullness of truth. Now look, don't misunderstand me. There is truth in the denominations of our Protestant brothers and sisters. Some have some truth, some have a lot of truth, some have a real lot of truth. None of them have all the truth. We have all the truth. If you think about evangelization, I know you've all had these arguments too. Well, you should come to my church. No, you should come to my church. No, you should come to my church. Forget about that. The question is not what church you should go to. The question is, what's the truth? Everybody should be prepared to follow the truth wherever it leads. I'll tell you right now, if anybody could ever prove to me that one doctrine of our church was wrong, one, I'd have to quit. Why? It would make no sense to stay. You're Catholic, you buy all of it. We don't have the right to pick and choose what we want to believe and not believe. When we have these evangelistic discussions with our Protestant brothers and sisters, and I know you've all done this 100 times, you always get asked these questions. What about this? What about that? It's always like, well, let's just agree on what we agree on and put the other stuff aside. It's not really relevant. We all believe in Jesus. And you've heard about let's just agree we all agree on the essentials. We just don't agree on the non-essentials. You've heard that? Well, it seems to me, if that thing is either a cracker or Almighty God himself, that seems to be essential. Can't be both. Truth never contradicts itself. It's either God or it's not God. It's binary. So we can't just slough that aside. Oh, we'll just disagree on whether it's God or a cracker or not. It's not reasonable to say, let's just slough aside whether you can lose your salvation or not. It seems to me, if I can lose my salvation, I kind of want to know that. I don't want to miss on that one. So whether you can or can't is not something you can slough off as non-essential. It's essential. If you need to be baptized to be saved, I'd like to know that so I can get baptized. So if we slough this off as, it's not essential, don't worry about it. in the sake of unity, that's a big mistake. We need to seek unity in truth, not unity in compromise.